Welcome to the Balanced Collective, where we love to go deep, talk big, and get real. I'm your host, Danielle Boyd, and every episode is going to bring a new concept or guest to talk all about things wellness, balance, and alignment. Our purpose here is to bridge the concepts of science and spirit to bring wellness and ease into the lives of our listeners while not taking life too seriously. We like to get down and deep into our shadow while keeping things raw, fun, and real. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get to it. We are back. It has been a hot minute since our last episode. I think it was back in October, which is, seems so far away now. Things have been a little bit quiet just on our social media space, podcast space, just because there's been some really exciting changes that have happened in the business lately. I've settled myself down into a nice little office in North Van, and things have been really busy in like a great way, and just learning to kind of rest my body and embrace the change that has come about. So that's been really beautiful. And now that things have kind of fallen back into place and into routine, the podcast was the next thing I wanted to start up again. So I'm really excited to start back up on this note. This week's episode is with someone that I just felt a really great connection with at the beginning of, as soon as we met. Tchir is the founder of Savor.co, and Savor is an absolutely amazing tool for helping people create a better, more mindful relationship with food. It's a really, really powerful app in the sense that you can download it and it has hundreds of guided practices that help you explore behaviors, emotions, beliefs, and experiences with food. It helps people set intentions that you can practice around food any part of your day. And the big tool that it uses is guided food journaling and self-reflection to help just reflect on all these processes that we have with our relationship with food. And I'll let Nick speak a little bit more to Savor and as to why he was so passionate about founding it. But I can say that not only is the tool itself a beautiful, beautiful incredible tool, but the actual design, which Nick has been a huge part of it, is beautiful as well. So he also wanted to share that Savor is right now for a yearly subscription is actually on for 20% off. So if you do download it, be sure to get it for the yearly rate because you'll save 20% if you do download Savor. So I really, really hope you enjoyed this episode. I learned a ton and just had an awesome connection with Nick, and I'm sure you're going to learn a ton from this episode. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Nick Tchir, founder of Savor. Nick, hi. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks
this is really
coming.
Great.
I'm really excited, and I'm we obviously have a couple degrees of separation, it sounds like, but yeah. I'm really, really excited just because the person who connected us is someone that I absolutely admire. So I'm really excited to chat a little bit more. But before we dive into the work that you're doing, who is Nick outside of the work?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I always struggle with that so much. It's like, who are you? And then I just get this big, oh, geez, who am I?
It's a bit existential,
yeah. Right? Yeah, I grew up in Vancouver, in the Lower Mainland. Mm-hmm. I'm someone that loves the outdoors. I mountain bike so much and snowboard so much and run a lot, and I just take full advantage of where we live. It's great. My day-to-day work, I'm creating digital technologies that are in the social goods space, economic goods space, so things that really help people, things that are climate aware, just using kind of my expertise to push forward things that are useful, things that are going to bring a lot more empathetic good to the world. So that's kind of where my career has landed over this time. Yeah.
How cool that you can blend skills, technological skills, I guess you could call it. I'm not very well versed in that area. Yeah. But how cool that you can blend that with, social consciousness and environmental consciousness. Where does that come from?
It just comes from I think in design, which is what I do. There's so many avenues you can take, and one of them is definitely more of a vapid kind of vain approach where you can just spend all day toiling about how people are going to buy things and consume. And when you're beginning in this career, it's usually kind of where you end up because you don't have too much of a say, too much of a pull into where you want to go. You just need to get that experience. And it's good experience. Yeah. After a while, for me, it doesn't happen for everyone, but after a while, I just started feeling very hollow, very kind of, where do I want to go? And then it just was a process of just like learning and growing and seeing where my own personal priorities and things that really meant to me lied. And that led into getting into designing for these types of things. Mm-hmm. So it's also just a sign of the times as well. And back when I started, like in 2008, this was much, much less apparent. Creating digital solutions for the climate, digital solutions for wellness and mindfulness were so much further away than they are right now. So this was a great fit for me over time. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, and that's an amazing segue into Savor and your new project. And if you will, I'd love to hear, your explanation of what Savor is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about creating a healthy relationship with food. It is the antithesis of calorie counting and body weight and body image. It is looking to help you find a more sustainable path and being more comfortable in your own skin rather than aiming for an ideal goal weight that is not going to last long and ultimately cause misery over happiness. And that's what we've seen over time.
Wow. Yeah. And what in your background led you to wanting to create something of this nature?
I think the marrying the side that I just spoke about around like creating these digital solutions in this space, in the social good space, mm-hmm. and then tying that to my own personal kind of story, and that has led me to understanding what food has meant to me and going off path around finding it as a way to cope with anxiety or cope with depression and getting and glorifying and romanticizing what food is to me versus using it as a source of energy, source of nourishment to let me go do the things I love, like I mentioned, like mountain biking and snowboarding and running and things like that. And kind of going full circle and straying off the path and coming back and having those learnings and meditating and being able to find those answers myself over the years, I was able to kind of marry the two. Because I know that, A, a lot of people struggle with eating and body image disorder, and B, as a male, it's a much less talked about space. In our 20s, in our early 20s for males at least, we all romanticize the perfect body, the abs, like the strong muscles, the alpha male, the guy who objectifies women, and this can all be tied back to our lifestyle, what's fed to us. Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of people that I'm surrounded by, kind of enter that in the early 20s and then kind of exit that as they exit their 20s and be much more empathetic to the people around them and much more caring to themselves. But with males, it's you kind of see that last a little bit longer. So being able to bring that light to this as well, I think, is a really important aspect.
It's huge. And I mean, in being in the female space, or the more predominantly female space, I see it happening in that area, but not as much in the male area. So, thank you, gratitude for actually exposing that, because it's huge. And our relationship with food is one of the most important relationships we really, truly can have.
Yeah.
How does Savor work to change that relationship?
Yeah, it works as an app. So this is a downloadable thing you can download on your phone. Traditionally, it would be someone that you go and see, someone that is recommended to you, and it's a one-on-one conversation. Right. How this works is somewhat similar, that you're given like a task every day. That task might be something introspective. It asks you a question, or it might ask you to do something like put your phone down and concentrate on what you're eating. Or it might ask you questions around, did you have any traumatic experiences as a child with food growing up? These are all questions that try and form a holistic view of who you are and what led you to kind of believe what you believe and what ends up on your plate. And ultimately what this does is creates a journal day by day, and over time gives you a really good view of who you are. So it kind of takes that mindfulness approach, gets you to think in different ways about food that you probably never have before. And these are all kind of broken into different themes across different courses that you can just pick and choose as you go along.
Wow. And so when you download the app, do you have access to all of them, or is it kind of like a sequential thing, like once you've opened one or unpacked one, then you move on to the next, or is there kind of a suggested way of using it, or?
There's some suggested courses based on who you are and what your intent of being there is, but you can absolutely pick and choose.
Right.
Because there might be the people that are totally aware of this type of practice and might want something that is a little bit more advanced, a little bit more deeper into who they are, and we can accommodate for that. But there's also like basics courses that teach you just like the simpler things around basic mindful eating tips and things like that.
Yeah, so kind of just laying the foundation, understanding like what is a relatively healthy relationship with food, and kind of creating those definitions around it. Okay, and like where do I stand on that spectrum, and then start to unpack it and go a little bit deeper. This might be a bit of an ambiguous question, but what do you define as a healthy relationship with food? Yeah, no,
it's so different to everyone else, and that's what's so great about it, right? For me, it's sustainability. It's comfort. It's knowing what I want to eat and why I want to eat it. It's, for example, like if it's in Vancouver, it's been raining and snowing, it's been awful out. For me, that's warmth. I want to go home. I want to eat pasta. I want to eat, stew. I want to eat shepherd's pie. And that gives me the joy of comfort. And that in itself, I feel like for me, is a healthy relationship because it's giving me something rather than me avoiding something. Right. Rather than me being a reaction to an emotional trigger that has happened. Oh, maybe I've had a bad day. Okay, I'm going to binge eat some food to get that comfort. No, I'm getting that comfort because I want to feel warm. I want to feel good. And that awareness is, I think, what the healthy aspect of that is.
Awareness is huge. And, it seems to be a theme with every single interview I've had. That space and time between I want to eat something and then taking that little pause and just saying, why? What's the why around that? Oh, it's, if it's something along the lines of, because I feel like garbage and I, want to soothe something, maybe that's not the healthiest, where you're like, oh, I'm cold. I just want something really nutritious and warm to make me feel good.
Yeah.
It's a very different, and I guess you have to feel into your body and feel what feels good and what doesn't, what's what's reactive versus, seeking that comfort or that nourishment that
absolutely
that we might want. And I know, so Kira, our mutual connection, who put us together, she has worked on a project with you, and her area of expertise is intuitive eating, and I would assume that you have a pretty good handle on intuitive eating as well. How would you define or explain intuitive eating to someone?
Yeah, great question. Ultimately, that word or that term gets thrown around so much. Yeah. And we have to remember that it was actually invented and written by two doctors. I always mess up their names. But Dr. Evelyn Tribole and Dr. Elise Reich, I believe. Okay. And they wrote the book on intuitive eating. And essentially, it is around coping with the fact that you've have had dieting disorder, which means, and what they define it as, someone that constantly and repeatedly goes on diets and is looking for some sort of change, but is completely unaware or unconscious of the fact that there are so many other drivers to this that are bringing you to want to diet. Obviously, a big portion of that is unhappy with what's in the mirror. Yeah. So the intuitive eating aspect is why, like, what the food makes me feel, why I'm eating, when am I going to feel full, and really just taking an introspective look at each meal and the drivers that get you there. At least I know it's probably a little bit less scientific than how they would describe it, but for me, That's how I translate it.
And is that something that you use in your own personal relationship with food?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I know that you have an interesting history, and obviously it's a big part of what led you to creating Savor. And I would love to talk a little bit about your evolving relationship with food and maybe kind of unpack that, because I know the story is really interesting.
Yeah. I know it's on the website, savor.co. I was encouraged to write that story and put it up there, and I'm just wondering, to throw back at you, what did you get out of it? What was it for you?
What really resonated with me was that you just developed a self-awareness as to how you were using food as a coping tool, as opposed to, what you described it previously as, in more of a healthy relationship, and how, you had your childhood experience, and then, in university, or it was in your early 20s, I believe you had mentioned in the bio, there was an awareness developed that perhaps it was being used more as a coping strategy versus a healthy relationship or a healthy tool to make you more active. Yeah. And I'm just curious as to how, A, you fostered that self-awareness, and B, changed the relationship.
Yeah. To throw it back, so as a kid, I always was outside. As soon as I got home from school, I'm throwing my backpack in-house and going outside and doing whatever with friends. And then when the proverbial dinner bell rang, I was back inside, and I ate it really fast, and either went back outside and did my thing or whatever. But over time, that changes, that skews, and as you get a little bit older, people start to nitpick you and start to judge you. And as a male, that all gets, and I'm definitely for both genders, for both female and male, it gets pushed down, especially when we're in high school or in our early teens. We don't talk about it. The way that I perceived myself, or try to perceive myself to others, is like, I'm perfect, I'm doing fine, and whatever I eat is absolutely perfect to what I need in this moment. And that just decays over time. Mm-hmm. And when I hit my early to mid-20s, I got so detached from that play, from that zone of, I use food as nourishment, as energy, so I can go do the things that I love. I got so detached from that even just the idea around going and doing those things was became a fear, became almost too much to handle. And it was such an odd thing to at first realize, and I really didn't. It took me a few years I was so kind of misunderstood around what was the driver, what was the triggers there.
Yeah, that was my question for you, is what do you think was the source of that dissociation?
Yeah, I still to this day, I really don't know. I think it was, my best guess is that I was just so disassociated with using food as a tool of nourishment versus anything else. And I had a rough childhood with my father figure, and that also was a coping mechanism as well. Mm-hmm. Leaving the house, being away from the house, being away from him was a big aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So entering the 20s and getting into that space, into college and getting into life and making those big decisions, everything just was like so fearful, like, oh, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? What am I doing day to day? And food was just a comfort of all of that. Mm-hmm. It turned from play to comfort as it went into my shell. Yeah. So if I could just eat and zone out and watch TV or something, that was so much better than eating and then going and doing other bold things that were outside or with other people. So
it's almost a numbing from whatever external fears or pressures or things were happening. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. And so at what point did you finally realize, oh my goodness, something has changed?
There was a lot of aspects. I think of my entire life I've been somewhat kind of introspective, very aware of my feeling, like of how I'm feeling. So it never really sat with me right, and I think that's why it always ended up more in the anxiety side than it did in the depression. Mm-hmm. And the numbing was there, and sometimes, like you said, but for a lot of it was more like a nervousness, like something I should be doing something. There should be like a fire burning inside, and that was really hard to handle. And I think one of the biggest catalysts for me was getting forced almost to go outside and run.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, whether he knew it or not, inadvertently helped me a lot in that day. And I was super reluctant to, even just go for like a small run. And just to get out there and do it, and everything was like brutal, and my heart was pounding, and I was sweating so much, huffing and puffing after 100 feet. Just to feel that moment where, I am out here, I'm sweating, my body is moving, and it's working really hard, and I feel great.
Yeah.
And then just like that, a switch flipped for me. Mm-hmm. And I was able to slowly, that wasn't like all of a sudden I was back into it, but I was able to slowly see that, I could trust myself, I could trust my body again. I can start to look at food more as that energy to trust, to burn. And that's when it started to change. And I think that was about, that's probably about 4 or 5 years ago now.
Wow.
So a lot has changed since then. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, obviously food has been a big part of it, but it seems like movement was a part of it, and being outside, and kind of like reawakening that inner child that just loved to be outside.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that we all forget, especially me. It's so much more than just the meal.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are tied to it, and that's what I was trying to capture with Savor. Is we don't care about what you eat, it's why, right? It's more about who you are. So yeah, the movement was a big part for me.
Yeah, and that's just it. So, I mean, food is obviously a huge part of movement and fueling different types of movement. And, if you're going to be running, you might need different types of fuel and see how they resonate in your body and how they feel in your body and how you perform. And, I mean, there's so many facets to it, but it's going to be different person to person, which is why a healthy relationship with food is hard to define. But it's that feeling in your body that feels right, feels good, and nourishes you and allows you to do the things you want to do ultimately.
Absolutely.
I really love the story. I mean, I unpack a ton of things in there with it, but
sure.
I know, I'm like,
I'm open book.
Which direction do I want to go with this right now? What do you say is your biggest tool now for like recognizing when maybe things are not going as healthy as you typically would like them to be, or like when do you ever have moments where you feel like you're kind of going off track, or I mean, not that you're on track and that's like, like we're starting to get into that like calorie counting mindset, but what are some of your signs that you are feeling not so great with the choices maybe?
Yeah. I think the signs are when I just, going back to movement, when I just haven't gotten out enough, or just haven't been able to exercise into some respect. I think for me, I've moved away from being like, okay, I need to exercise to moderate my weight or salt count, whatever. Yeah. It's all about just the joy of movement. Yeah. So when I'm unable to do that, that's when I start feeling a little bit like, I need to go and do that. I tend to stay away from, for me personally, I tend to stay away from like on path and off path. Yeah. Because it then starts to trigger, I'm going off path, and now I need to really kind of steer in the other direction way too hard. Right? And now I'm going to only eat, salads for a week or something like that to get back on, and that's just not sustainable. No. We need to look at these things as individual moments, and treat them as such. Like for me, eating is eating, moving is moving, and they're separate. So when I start to feel off path, or when I start to feel that or unhappy, let's say, or less kind of stoked on life, usually movement for me is something that makes me happier. We'll light that fire again. Yeah, and that's a good way to say it, instead of being on path, on track, or whatever you want to call it, but just a feeling in your body changes, and I know that feeling very well. Like you're perhaps overwhelmed with work, haven't been moving as much, and then all of a sudden you just, you feel heavier, you feel boggier, you just don't feel that energy or that fire in your body as much anymore. Perhaps that's a better way of, again, listening to your body and feeling that intuitively what's happening in your body. Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. How can, so I mean, if you were to meet someone who
perhaps didn't even recognize that they had an unhealthy relationship with food, but they were, starting to dabble and were, exploring things. What are some things that you would suggest to people to just start to explore that relationship and start to create perhaps a healthier relationship? What are some like baby steps that people can start to take?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one, the biggest thing is ridding ourselves of external cues, and this is a big piece of it. Unfollow anyone who professes body weight image, anyone that gives you any sort of envy or body envy. Social media is obviously a big aspect of this. Anyone that sells like fit tea or other types of dieting pills just to make a buck, they really don't care about who you are at all. You're just a number to them. Delete them off your phone. I think that's the first step.
Yeah.
The next step is download Savor.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The things that are easy for everyone to do because we all do it day to day is eat a meal. And I think this is a great place to start, is to zero out any distractions. And this is like, turn off the TV, put down the phone, and really just for a moment, take a look at your food and just look at its texture, look at its color. Maybe, count the number of colors in your head before you eat, and just kind of look at it. And it might look good, it might not look so good. It doesn't matter. It's more about like, I'm here in the moment with this meal. And a lot of people like to profess, eat in silence, and that's all good. And I think that's a great mindful tip. But for a lot of people, this is looked at as like a lonely thing, a boring thing, a sad thing, and it doesn't fit into their lives.
And perhaps it could be a trigger for some people if they've been forced to eat alone or whatever. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And culturally, there's a lot of people that sit around the dining room table with their family or their friends or their loved ones, whoever that may be, or the coworkers, and eating is a gathering tool. And they want to chat and they want to talk about their day and eat with their mouth open while the food's flying out of their mouth. And that's all good.
Yeah.
And you absolutely should continue to do that.
Yeah.
But there is room to take a second before that happens and to just connect with what you're about to eat. And don't look at it as a obstacle for the rest of your day. Look at it as in the moment as, this is my meal, I'm appreciating this meal, and that can help you bring you into the moment. That can be the catalyst to start realizing what it's doing to me. When am I full? Do I actually enjoy this? Am I eating this because someone told me that this is good for me? So this is where we can start.
Just cultivating some mindfulness around it. And again, creating that gap in time that allows you to have that intuition and that understanding and that listening to your body and seeing how you're responding to it.
Totally.
And I mean, something that really is from more of like, I'm such a science brain, but ultimately we start digestion with our eyes and our nose. So if we just wolf down a meal in front of the TV on our phones, we're not getting those enzymes or that, that amylase production in the mouth, or, like that all happens before we can even actually taste the food. So like cooking it, or whether it is even just sitting there looking at it, absorbing the colors with our eyes and smelling it, those things help with the actual like scientific digestive process.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to hear more about that because I feel like that is such an unknown thing to the general public.
Right?
Yeah.
The sequence of, and this is something that I treat in my practice, is the sequence of organ function. And the digestive sequence that we look at is it's smell, taste, and then swallow. So, and I would argue that even like vision is probably the first thing in there too, before the smell. But if that sequence is not being honored in eating, then the sequence is going to be off, and not all the proper reflexes are going to happen in the digestive system to absorb all the nutrients. And yeah, I mean that comes from the work of Dr. Jose Palomar in Mexico, founded one of the main techniques that I use. But it's really, really helping with a lot of clients just with that piece. But the problem is if they go back and don't do the actual, process that, like smell the food, look at the food, it's just going to revert back to, being out of sequence. But it is really interesting. So so not only does it cultivate that mindfulness and that moment of pause, but I mean, digestively, it's going to help you absorb more nutrients.
That's a big piece of it. We always tend to, at least for me, sometimes I always tend to want to forget both the nutrients part and the nutritious part and what it's actually doing for me, and kind of just focus on the eating of it, and then that can be distracted in so many ways, right?
Eating in the car,
the lunch bell. Okay, gotta eat. Okay, I'm done. Go back to work, and then I don't take that second to actually appreciate and analyze the food at all.
It's huge. And I mean, we can apply that to so many other areas of our life, instead of like banging off an email really quickly, maybe like mindfully sit and prepare your words, or, being present for a conversation, or, there's so many areas that we can really truly apply that mindfulness and awareness to.
Absolutely.
Which is huge.
And so just to bring it back to what we were previously talking about, I want to talk a bit about our core beliefs.
Our core beliefs are deep rooted within us, and obviously have many facets, but how do our core beliefs affect our relationship with food?
Yeah, this one's big, and I think this one is really the kind of the core to the problem that we experience when we disassociate with food and what it does for us. So much of our beliefs, whether we consciously know it or not, are externally fed to us. One aspect is what we see in the media, what we see day to day when we scroll Instagram. One aspect is those little bit of those small little opinions or nitpicks that our loved ones or family, tell us about ourselves. Or when we enter a family gathering and our, aunt says, "Oh, you gained some weight," or something like that. That has a lasting effect, and that plays a big part, and that is usually a trigger that leads to finding, what could I eat to lose weight, or how do I lose fat without losing weight, or how do I do this, or how do I do that? And all of those search terms, whether it be guided to Google, or whether it be focused to a person when you're asking that question, you'll always get something skewed that has nothing to do with what your personal body actually needs, and what your personal body, I guess you could call it, believes needs to survive. Because your body works on survival, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't care about what you look like at all. Right? It's all external. So bringing it back to a healthy relationship of beliefs is really, again, being in tune with what your body needs, and that's a great place to start. But getting there takes a lot of work. Getting there is unpacking all those things. Where did all those traumas come from? Where did all those turning points happen, and why? Right. Why did you turn to the lemon cayenne water diet for 6 days? Where did that come from? Why do you think it's good to have a kale salad only once a day? Why do you think it's okay to hide chocolate bars and not let other people see you eat food that makes you feel good? These are all beliefs that came from somewhere, not from your external or internal body.
Right.
So it's important to face those and question them, to start to unpack and have a more sustainable, healthy relationship.
And that's super important in a day and age when those core beliefs can be reinforced constantly at us between ads on social media, TV, even just, like I watched a movie the other night and he was eating a kale salad because he felt like he had to. And, those core beliefs are constantly being reiterated towards us. And so, like you said, unfollowing accounts that are, selling these things is going to be a huge part of getting rid of those triggers. But, I mean, sometimes they're absolutely inescapable, especially when you go home for dinner or you have dinner with so-and-so who, has XYZ core beliefs about food. They're constantly going to be thrown at us. So I think, like
that's the thing. We're always moving and shifting with other people's baggage and other people's beliefs. How do you cut through that?
Yeah.
Right? It's a big part.
And it's an interesting thing, too, when you start to unpack your own beliefs and start to, renegotiate your relationship with food. Other people can sometimes start to feel threatened by that. Maybe you change your style of eating and other people then start to get a bit more reactive because for whatever reason they're feeling triggered or they're not prepared to look at their own trauma and unpack that. And so that relationship can change between people as well, and it's a really interesting thing when people start to unpack their core wounds and their core beliefs, reprogram them. It's amazing how your relationships with other people start to change as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But recognizing those traumas and triggers is huge.
Yeah, that's the first step.
Yeah. So you recommend obviously like unfollowing the people that are promoting the detox teas and the, you know, XYZ products.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions for, you know, either A, avoiding the triggers, but B, starting to look at core beliefs?
Yeah. Avoiding the triggers, real quick on that too. Like, yeah, there's the obvious culprits, right? But there might be culprits out there that are a little bit less, or a little bit more vague, a little bit more ambiguous, that you really start to realize once you start questioning these things. It might be someone that you grew up with, a friend, someone that, you know, posts, you know, how this one diet was really successful for them, but isn't gaining any sort of monetary value, and so you don't look at it as as much of a threat as you would for someone that is pushing that detox tea. But it's still, to you, it might be something that's triggering, and I know sometimes it might be hard to unfollow them or push them away while you're going through this healing process. But it's absolutely something that I recommend that you do, because it's going to help you heal, and that is what we're talking about, is the self, and making those boundaries. Mm-hmm. And to start, you know, finding what those beliefs are, again, starts from just taking those small steps with mindful eating, with being able to question, why am I eating this meal? Why am I here right now? Why is this in front of my plate? Mm-hmm. And digging into the why. Right. And to really get to the true why. A good tip and tool that I use, and that I use actually in my day-to-day career when I'm interviewing people about the products that they use, is I tend to use 5 whys. Mm. So starting with the surface why is usually something, the answer will be something that is externally driven. Why am I eating a kale salad? Oh, it's healthy for me. Why do you think it's healthy for you? Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, why don't you know? And then really digging deep. And then once you get usually to that 5th or 6th why, or 4th or 5th why, you can start to unpack the problem. Yeah.
I like that. And it just gives depth and layers to where this is coming from. And perhaps the first why is because, my mom says it's healthy. Okay, why does your mom say it's healthy? Okay, she says it's healthy because, you know, someone else told her it was healthy. And then you can kind of start to, trace it back. Yeah. And then eventually, getting down to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I really got to stop bashing on kale salad. I always use that as an example, but kale salads can be great. They taste amazing. Totally. But I think that's just my go-to, is like what people think immediately is like, oh, that's a healthy food, it's going to help me lose weight.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, your work with Savor is obviously very personal, mm-hmm. but your background has been in design and tech for quite a while, and mm-hmm. you're obviously very entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. How do you? I mean, being an entrepreneur, as we know, can be quite life-consuming, which is probably why we have a hard time dissociating life from work and defining ourselves outside of our work. But our work is our life. But kind of an aside, but. How would you say that you maintain your inner wellness? I mean, we've talked about food and we've talked about the mindfulness, but is there any mm-hmm. maybe not non-negotiables, because everything is negotiable, but anything that really for you is really truly important to help you maintain your own inner wellness as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel like there's so many distractions and ways you can go off of that path. For me, it's being absolutely positive of what my priorities are, mm-hmm. and what my goals are. And that brings me function and happiness to go out and do those things. So for me, creating a business, doing good work, hanging out with friends that are important to me, and doing those fun hobbies are my priorities. Mm-hmm. So anything that doesn't kind of fit that space or makes me feel joy or any sort of positive feelings, or at least working towards those positive feelings, I just don't save space for those things. Mm. And that keeps the ability to kind of have a balance, to have a inner wellness continue on and grow, because I know I've taken a day or taken 2 days out of every year to be like, this is what I'm driving towards. And like taking a moment with your food, I'm just taking a moment with my life and be like, what am I doing? Like, what am I day-to-day? Why am I waking up? Right. It's so important for me to have that second, have that pause and be like, oh yeah, this is what makes me happy. These are the people that make me happy. These are the goals that I want to strive towards in the next 2, 5, 10 years, and that is kind of what keeps me going.
That clarity of vision, and I mean that's always evolving, I would assume. But I love the idea of like taking check-ins, and whether that's yearly, you take a day or two, and like maybe hole yourself up in a beautiful cabin somewhere, and like just have a retreat where you're actually like getting clear on it, or like kind of make it fun. But then check in on that and making like monthly check-ins or weekly, or even if it's at the end of the day, just writing down like, what am I grateful for today? What happened? What were some of my successes? Or, like, where did I learn?
Absolutely. It can go from, such a big view, from like a 10-year view, all the way down to like, to the moment.
Yeah.
And we can be and we can analyze and have those mindful moments at any stage.
Yeah.
People argue like, oh, like, don't you want to have days where you kind of float around and, and you don't have much aim? Absolutely. I want those days, of course.
Yeah.
And I save space for those days.
Yeah.
But when I get back into it, I know where I want to be going and where I want to be heading.
I love the concept of saving space or creating space for things, because if we fill our proverbial plate up with so many activities and so many projects and things, there's no space for opportunity or space for play or growth or these other things. And so I really like that. And part of creating that space is also having healthy boundaries and having the ability to say no to some things, and that can be hard sometimes, to say no to opportunities. But again, that's checking in and does this feel good in my body? Does this feel good for me to perhaps take on a project? And
taking ownership. It's a big piece of it,
right? Are there any like boundaries that you've had to create, or any like what are kind of your strategies for creating space?
Creating goals, I think, is the biggest piece for me, because then it allows me, that gives me, for me, that permission to have those moments of space, whatever that may be, going on a vacation or having a day of just watching TV and doing nothing. Like, that's all good, because in my head I know where I want to go, where I want to end up in that regard. So whether it be career, relationship, family, whatever it is, that's still there, even though I have a moment to take a break. That's totally fine. And the boundaries I set up are totally intuitive. So I try and not to kind of close myself in and stay very safe. You know what I mean? With around like, okay, I'm only doing these things, and if it's day to day, I'm going to continue to do that thing. You really get shut in. So I try and keep an open mind, try and keep myself to be quite inquisitive and curious. And it's totally taking a moment to realize whether this is actually making me feel positive or negative.
Right.
Whatever.
Intuitive choice making.
Intuitive choice making.
Everything is just really like, how does it feel in your body?
Yeah.
And so many people, and and I've experienced it too. Like, we become disconnected from our body, but our body and our consciousness is really truly the greatest gift and tool we have.
Yeah.
And I mean, cultivating that awareness and cultivating that relationship and that ability to tune in and see, is this a yes or a no, is huge. And I mean,
even if it's a brand new experience, it's like, this feels great, this is great. Even if it's something that's so totally random. This week I'm headed to Japan, and there's so many unknowns that await me, but I'm excited to kind of see where I fit in that, and not going to bend too much to accommodate other people's needs or desires or what already exists there, right? Yeah. Even if it's totally foreign land, I can still live within my boundaries. I can still live within what I operate in.
And going into the unknown, I mean, like, sometimes we're uncomfortable with unknown, but that's where growth happens.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing. And how amazing to go to such a, oh my gosh, you're going to have some of the best food over there and experience just some like, really, really cool things.
Yeah. Have you been there before?
No, never. No. My partner's been there, and he like keeps wanting to go back, and I'm like, well, we're going to go on a snowboard trip then. Yeah. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I am.
Oh my gosh. I've heard it is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man, how cool. And what a great way to like move your body, experience some new food, some new culture, some new people, and oh my gosh, what a cool thing.
Yeah.
it's interesting, actually. I wanted to segue a little bit into food again.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really neat segue then, because when you're in Japan, I mean, when we're in these unknowns, we're going to try different things. And so many of us become very restrictive. And so, you know, maybe we go to Mexico and you want to try different foods and stuff, but, oh, I can't eat that. And going on a trip is a great way to just, like, explore different things, guilt and shame free. And I think that's where, you know, like, there's so much guilt and shame around what we eat, and letting that go and being able to explore unknowns is a really, truly a big gift. And how would you, I mean, you've probably experienced guilt and shame around certain things that you've eaten. Have you been able to let that go to an extent, or, like, have you improved that?
Yeah, I've totally been able to let that go. It goes back to, like, ownership, and the I want and I don't want is something that I thought was, like, a bad thing. Then I learned to bring that back into my life as, like, oh, this is me bringing back power into my decisions and those boundaries and what I like and what I don't like. And when I'm exploring new cuisine, new food, new experiences, it still plays such a big role, because now I use the I don't want to things that I have already am sure I don't want. When I don't know what it is, or I've never experienced it before, for example, you know, going there, there are so many things that live in the ocean that they serve up that you really have never seen here before. I don't know if I don't want that. And and that is clear, right? And it becomes extremely obvious as soon as I take the first bite, but at least I've done that, right? I'm not setting it up because it doesn't look like, you know, the beige kind of carby chicken wing potato mash that you get that I normally have here. It's an unknown, so it becomes a known once I've tried it. And I think that for me is having that clear black and white understanding is what keeps me curious, keeps me trying new foods, and keeps me more comfortable.
I love that. It's and giving yourself the space to try it, and then deciding if it's a yes or a no. So like let's hop into the unknown. Let's have this bite, but then not feeling guilty if you don't finish it because it doesn't feel good, or vice versa, right?
Exactly.
You know, like,
oh, I like it, I'll have more. I don't like it, I'll stop.
Yeah. Great. So it doesn't have to be a decision before you've eaten. It can be it's something that you're constantly evaluating while you're eating it, or throughout the meal, or throughout the trip, or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love the idea of I just love the idea of trying new foods and things like that. And previously, you know, you've gone on trips, and I was in Italy a couple years ago, and my boyfriend would always have gelato, like, after every meal. But I was very, like, no, I don't need the gelato. But, like, now I look back and I'm like, what difference would it have made? My trip would have been so much, you know, more elevated perhaps if I just had the gelato after dinner. It wouldn't have, like, we were walking around like crazy. It was, you know, like, it would have done nothing. And at the time, the beliefs were like, no, can't have it. Yeah. And yet, that's Italy, right?
I can't. That's a great point. In Italy, the motherland of gelato, right? Still, you wouldn't have it. Yeah. Right? And it's because of some belief about gelato?
Gelato is bad for you. It's got too much sugar. It's, you know, now, like, give me all the gelato when I go there to whatever feels comfortable, right?
I'll only have gelato. I'll have an appetizer gelato, an entree gelato, and then I'll have dessert gelato. We're going to have
pistachio, we're going to have... But, I mean, that's just it. Like, I look back at some of my behaviors and choices and think, wow, that was, you know, out of fear. And that's just it. I think making choices out of fear can be quite confining. If we're choosing to not eat something out of fear for weight gain or fear of too much sugar or whatever it is, then that's when it becomes unhealthy.
No, that's a great point. It's fear-based, and that kind of is what closes you in. I was trying to make a point earlier, but I think what really wraps it up is fear. And if I really enclose myself, then I'll never be able to find what those boundaries are. And it's because of fear. Yeah.
We won't sample those strange sea creatures in Japan then if we're fearful of them.
No, we won't.
So before we wrap up, I have a couple more just like spitfire questions for you. But how can people find Savor? How can people sign up for it? How can we find it?
Yeah, Savor's available to download on the App Store and the Google Play Store right now. So you can get it. It released in October, and it's It's live and you can download it now. Online, on the web, we're at savor.co. You can go there and you can sign up for our free ebook on Rejecting the Diet Mentality, which is a great intro into this whole, new ideology that we've been talking about. So you can get that now for free, and then you can also find us on Instagram at Savor Wellness Inc.
Awesome. I've been following you guys, and I have to say, not only is the message beautiful, the branding is beautiful. Like the photos. Is that you that does all that?
Yeah.
It's stunning. And that, I mean, obviously your design background is really coming in handy there. It's beautiful, and I absolutely love it. And I love the team that you've built around it. You've got obviously high quality design. You've got Tchir doing a lot of the nutritional advising within it.
Yeah.
And there's someone else on the team as well, right?
Yeah, we can't leave out Sherry.
Yes.
Sherry is an amazing writer, and she brings a consistent sustainability of tone across what Savor is, and making sure that it sounds great, and we avoid using triggering words, avoid using things like find what your body wants to look like, and things that we really don't want to represent.
I love that consciousness around that, because our language is so powerful.
Extremely, yeah.
We could go on for hours about language, and language, even just in my field, is really, really powerful. You don't want to tell someone they're broken if they're not, because they'll attach themselves to that. And that's, a whole other tangent. But, congratulations. Savor is a really powerful tool. So I'm excited for everyone to actually be able to experience it, because I think what you guys have done is fantastic.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Any last words or anything else you want to share about Savor?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful tool. It's a great intro to what an alternative to dieting culture is, and I know that there's such a much more big movement nowadays than there used to be, and people are waking up to this. They're sick and tired of feeling like they're not enough. That they'll never be able to achieve their ideal body. So we really try and empathize and lean in on who you are and what makes you tick. And we're just trying to surround you with this healing, comfortable space. And guided food journaling is the tool in which we do so, and it's a proven tool that has been used for many years with professionals in one-on-one situations in real life. And as we continue to grow and build Savor, we want to, branch out into many different types of content that would fit into all different aspects of life. And I think what's really exciting and interesting about it is we can write for people of different cultures. We can write for people with specific needs. Like going back to my story, we can write a whole thing around movement and really talk about food in that movement space. We can talk about it in religion. How has religion shaped what's on your plate? Because it absolutely has, if you're religious and your family has pushed religion onto you, or you have made that choice to be religious. Or if you are a newcomer in athleticism, whatever that may be. Again, dieting is such a big part of that, but you can really get lost and down that rabbit hole. There can be courses around, athleticism and sports. So there's so much room to move, and we're always looking for feedback. You can reach us at info@savor.co, and we'd love to read any stories or reply back to anything.
Amazing. That's really cool. I love how, what's the word I'm looking for? Interactive it is. That's really cool. You guys are very responsive to that, and I am really excited to see Savor grow. I think that's a really neat thing, and being able to explore different areas and different people and different genres will be a really cool tool for you.
Because we want to include everyone. It's very inclusive,
Exactly, and that's just it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My last question, and everyone gets this question, what is your definition of balance?
Yeah, I thought about this one. To make it short, I think my definition of balance is to do everything I want in a day, but still be able to sleep as long as I want.
I love that. Sleep is really truly the key.
Oh man, yeah.
It's huge. Prioritizing that.
Yeah. Don't listen to Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
He says, sleep for 2 hours, sleep for 4 hours, that's all you need. There's a lot of entrepreneur blogs and podcasts out there that'll say, do what you can. sacrifice sleep. You'll do that later in your life.
Oh my gosh, no.
I'm saying double down on sleep. Sleep more.
Yeah.
It's healthy for you. It is unbelievably awesome. It makes me super happy, and I'll choose sleep if I feel tired over anything else.
And again, it boils back to that intuitive knowledge too, right? Like, I feel really tired. I'm going to prioritize 10 hours of sleep tonight because I need it.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I know people need to do it more.
Right? I love sleep too. Well, thank you so much. I love that. There's a really great podcast. You've probably listened to it. Joe Rogan interviewed Dr. Matthew Walker, I believe his name is.
Yep.
Who's a sleep expert. Mm-hmm. And he echoes exactly what you've said, and he talks about it for 3 hours. And it's an amazing podcast, and that for me was a huge, huge game changer. So if anyone wants to listen to more information about sleep, that's a whole rabbit hole you can go down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. I will link in the show notes to all the to everything Savor that you've talked about, and then perhaps some other resources or things online that we can look into for ditching the diet culture and whatnot. So people can find all that in the show notes, and I will link to Savor, the app, as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Fantastic conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this episode as expansive as I did. If you enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and review. It means so much to us. If you would like to learn more about The Balanced Collective and our offerings, please visit www.thebalancedcollective.com or hit us up on Instagram @thebalancedcollective. Thank you so much, and please keep spreading your light.